Today, we will examine behavior theory, a foundational model of intervention in clinical social work practice. We will also investigate cognitive behavioral therapy (CB), which is critical for implementing effective treatment strategies. Now, what sets behavioral practitioners apart? They primarily focus on physical, observable, objective behavior with a relative lack of concern for a client's internal mental processes. Behavioral practice is also characterized by a commitment to the traditional scientific method, principles to help clients eliminate unwanted behaviors or acquire desired ones. Behavior therapy has three significant approaches. The first is behavior analysis, which focuses on the consequences of behavior. The stimulus response model emphasizes environmental factors that elicit and maintain a behavior. Social learning theory. This perspective concerns cognitive mediational processes to understand behavior. Let's talk about the origins and social context of behaviorism. Behaviorism has been a prominent force in the social sciences since the first half of the 20th century, gaining popularity among clinical practitioners by the 1960s. Its rise was closely linked to the advancement of logical empiricism, initially in philosophy and later in the sciences. A fundamental principle of behaviorism is that all claims to knowledge should be subject to testing and verification. The first major innovator of behaviorism in psychology was Wilhelm Wundt in Germany, often called the late 19th century father of experimental psychology. Wundt believed that the laws governing cognitive and emotional experience could be derived using the same research methods employed to study human physiology. He established the first psychology laboratory for experiments with animals. Contemporary discussion of behaviorism often begins with Watson's work. He coined the term behaviorism, conducted experiments on humans, and brought the approach into mainstream psychology. Watson aimed to establish psychology as a science that could predict and control events, emphasizing using objective methods that would allow multiple scientists to observe the same objects and events. B. F. Skinner further refined the principles of operant conditioning, and his extensive publications, including those for general audiences, brought behaviorism into public awareness. It's important to note that behavior theory and its related interventions are prominent in social work. Thomas was the first social worker to extensively advocate for the behavioral perspective in direct practice, conducting research on intervention with substance abusers and couples, among other client populations. Now let's move on to some significant concepts of behavior theory. The basic principles and assumptions include: behavior is what a person does, thinks, or feels that can be observed. Because mental activity cannot be directly observed, inferences about it should be minimized. Clinical assessment should focus on observable events with minimal interpretation. People are motivated by nature to seek pleasure and avoid pain. They're likely to behave in ways that produce encouraging responses or positive reinforcement. However, it's crucial to remember that determining what constitutes pleasure and pain for a specific client isn't always straightforward. People behave based on their learning through direct environmental feedback and watching others behave and interact. Behavior is amenable to change. A prerequisite for change is that the behavior of concern must be defined in measurable indicators. Intervention should focus on influencing reinforcements or punishments for client behaviors. Consistent and immediate reinforcement produces change most rapidly. Thoughts and feelings are behaviors subject to reinforcement principles. The simplest explanations for behavior are preferred. Practitioners should avoid reification, giving life to esoteric concepts, such as the ego and searching for ultimate causes of behavior. It's important to note that behaviors do not offer a theory of human development. However, they do acknowledge that genetic and biological factors are relevant to a person's sensitivity to stimuli and attraction to specific reinforcers. Let's discuss the nature of problems and change from a behavioral perspective. Behavior theory posits that the same learning principles, including classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and modeling influence all behavior. No behavior is inherently healthy or unhealthy or normal or abnormal. Instead, all behavior is developed and maintained because of a person's unique reinforcement schedules. Reinforcement is defined as any environmental feedback that encourages the continuation of a behavior. We have three key types of learning in behavior theory. Classical conditioning. This is a process where an initially neutral stimulus produces a certain response after being paired repeatedly with another stimulus. Classical conditioning plays a role in understanding many problems that clients experience. In intervention, the principles are reversed, helping clients gradually face anxiety-provoking situations. A significant challenge is ensuring that significant others in the client's life consistently support new reinforcement contingencies for long-term effect. And conditioning. The main idea here is that the consequences of present behavior determine future behavior. Practitioners also consider the antecedent, or prior conditions that may trigger the behavior. There are two types of reinforcement, positive and negative, which encourage the continuation of a behavior. Positive reinforcement involves a rewarding consequence, while negative reinforcement involves the termination of an aversive event following a behavior. In practice, clients are helped to find alternative reinforcements to reduce problem behavior. Operant conditioning can also occur when people gain environmental control over others' behavior, modeling. People also learn by modeling, watching others engage in behaviors, and observing the reinforcements or punishments they receive. Modeling is a common way of learning, especially for children and adolescents. Practitioners use didactic instruction, discussion, and modeling and intervention to promote behavior change. The client then practices the new behavior through behavioral rehearsal and receives feedback. Covert modeling can also be used where the client imagines the successful completion of steps. Practitioners often prefer coping models, demonstrating satisfactory progress and managing struggles over mastery models. Perfection because clients can identify more easily with them. It's important to remember that most situations cue or prompt behaviors based on classical conditioning associations, operant conditioning prior experiences, or modeling watching others. The primary goal of behavioral intervention is to change behavior. This is achieved by using reinforcers and punishments. The social worker helps clients develop new, desirable behaviors by manipulating the environment to change reinforcement patterns or providing new opportunities for positive modeling. Identifying a client's specific antecedent conditions and reinforcing responses can be challenging. Now let's discuss assessment and intervention in behavior theory. Assessment, the social worker relationship. A positive social worker-client relationship is crucial while behavior therapy is structured. The social worker must be perceived as competent, caring, and trustworthy to encourage the client to engage in potentially uncomfortable or threatening behaviors. Remember, the behavior of both parties in the relationship is subject to conditioning principles. The practitioner's empathy will facilitate a positive relationship. The social worker must avoid using punishing behaviors, especially initially, as this can be alienating. Collaboration with the client in devising intervention strategies is essential to ensure the client has a strong investment in change. After orienting the client to behavioral intervention principles, the practitioner can perform a comprehensive assessment through functional behavior analysis. This involves clearly and concretely specify the client's problem behavior and identify the environmental conditions keys that enhance or maintain the behavior, considering the consequences of the behavior. Here are examples of assessment questions a social worker might ask: when, where, and with whom do you experience the behavior? How long does it typically last? What happens immediately after the behavior? What do you or others do? What bodily reactions do you experience? How long do these last? How often does the behavior occur, daily, weekly? What is the typical timing of the behavior, week, month, year? What do people around you usually do when the behavior is happening? The eco-behavioral assessment is similar to functional behavior analysis in that it considers the client's behavior in a broad context. However, it uses an eco-map to illustrate the client's interactions with different domains and focuses more on external systems. From these assessments, the practitioner identifies the reinforcers and triggers that maintain the problem behavior. This leads to the planning stage, where the practitioner and client develop concrete target behaviors, considering antecedent conditions and contingency for the desired new behaviors. Intervention. The intervention process in behavior theory is systematic and includes the following steps. The client's problems are stated in behavioral terms. Measurable outcomes related to problem reduction are developed. The practitioner and client gather baseline data on the current occurrence of the problem behavior. The steps required to reach problem resolution are specified. The client's personal and environmental resources for making changes are specified. Any other people who will participate in the intervention are identified and sought out for consultation, often to act as reinforcers. Possible obstacles to goal achievement are identified in advance, and plans are made to minimize them. An appropriate intervention strategy is chosen with the client's participation, emphasizing positive consequences for new behaviors. Generally, behavioral practice focuses on rewarding positive behavior rather than punishing negative behavior whenever possible. The practitioner, client, or others collect data about the client's activities, and the client's behavior changes are documented regularly. The client and practitioner evaluate the intervention process regularly, comparing baseline data to current counts of desired behavior. The intervention ends after the client achieves their goals and demonstrates the likelihood of goal maintenance. Ending intervention in behavior theory involves fading, where support is gradually withdrawn as the client acquires the desired new behaviors. It's worth emphasizing that applied behavior analysis has become a standard behavioral intervention for social work. ABA removes avoidable antecedents for problem behavior, breaks down desirable behaviors into smaller steps, introduces them to the child, and provides positive reinforcement for each successful performance. This intervention is also characterized by its intensity. Now let's briefly touch on spirituality and behavior theory. Behaviorism focuses on concrete, observable events and does not give particular attention to ideas related to spirituality or purpose in life. These topics are often abstract and relate to internal belief systems outside the behavioral practitioner's primary concern. The behavioral practitioner is concerned with mental life only as it is represented in external behavior. Regarding attention to social justice, behavior theorists argue that their methodology can be used effectively to promote various social justice issues. Social workers possess collective reinforcers like knowledge and resources. While manipulation in behavioral therapy can have a negative connotation compared to collaboration for many social workers, it's essential to understand the philosophical basis. Effective behavioral methods aim to increase client skills in influencing their environment, not insidiously or unfairly. Behaviorism requires social workers to understand the unique reinforcers of oppressed and culturally diverse groups. Behavioral practitioners also use outside resources to help clients learn and change behavior. In terms of evidence of effectiveness, behavioral interventions remain popular because quantitative research methodologies often support their effectiveness. While behavior theory may not definitively claim superiority, its efficacy can be concretely demonstrated in many cases. There are also criticisms of the theory. Behavior therapy has been described as empowering because it educates clients about change processes, but it is sometimes seen as dehumanizing, overlooking important aspects of life. Another criticism is its reliance on a controlled environment for consistent application of reinforcements or punishments, which can be challenging to achieve in real-world settings where clients interact with many people. We are often unaware of the full range of stimuli and reinforcers influence our behaviors. In summary, behavior theory offers a direct practice approach focused on observable, concrete client behaviors and outcomes, rather than internal mental processes. It stands out for its emphasis on empirical research on its effectiveness. Despite criticisms of being overly reductionistic, its focus on monitoring action has been adapted within other perspectives and is often combined with cognitive theory in social work practice.